Chapter 21, Black Market, 1. Late night, Friday. I never would have predicted finding myself in such a place only a week after reincarnating into this world. The Black Market. The place that resembled the demon world the most in the human domain. A world separate from where laws and morals exist, and the only place where villains and heroes could coexist. That was where I was currently at. Taking the air train all the way to the outer edge of Ashen City, I quickly dropped off on the second last stop and headed towards an obscure location. Making sure the mask I was wearing was tightly secured, I found myself in front of a large metal door. When entering the black market, wearing a mask was compulsory so that each guest could keep their identity hidden. On the off chance that government agents managed to infiltrate the black market, they wouldn't be able to track you down. Bam! 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 Knocking on the door 3 times, I patiently waited. Clang! Shortly after, 2 burly individuals wearing neat suits emerged from behind the door and scanned my body a couple of times. Feeling their gaze on me, my back started to drench in a cold sweat. Their individual rank is definitely C or higher. I thought as I felt the immense pressure oozing out from their body. Turning his head towards the individual to the left, the burly individual on the right nodded and spoke with a deep voice. "What might you be here for? I heard from a passing bird that you were looking for volunteers." "We are indeed looking for a volunteer. Which job are you looking to volunteer for?" "I heard that you guys needed someone to paint your walls." "We only have 4 paints, blue, black, pink and white. Which one do you think would be the most adequate for our walls? Although I may have not seen what you needed to paint, I believe blue would look best in anything." Turning their faces to face each other, the 2 burly individuals nodded to each other and signaled for me to enter. Letting out a sigh of relief, I followed the 2 of them along a dark and narrow passage. There were 2 ways for an individual to enter the black market. One was through a recommendation letter given by a higher-up in the black market, or 2 by knowing the secret code. The secret code was split into 3 different segments, where each new segment was a continuation of the previous one. In my case, the first segment was "What might you be here for?", for which the word volunteer was used to gain access to the next segment. This pattern repeats 3 times until the guards could confirm the authenticity of the guest who was trying to come in. In this way, the chances of inspectors infiltrating into the black market diminished by a large margin. Actually, this wasn't really necessary as inspectors were not actually against the idea of a black market. Just as things have their disadvantages, they also had their advantages. Being the central hub for both heroes and villains, vital information could be gathered from information brokers which could, in turn, help government agents pry into some of the villains' plans. Information brokers were essentially individuals or an organization which specialized in sharing information for a price. Depending on the type of information, the higher the price for the information. Fortunately in my case, as I was the author, I basically knew most of the things the information brokers knew. If I wanted to, I could disclose some important information and make some serious cash, but that would probably be a stupid idea as it could lead to me getting attention and also potentially changing the plotline of the story. And with the information that I knew, I was easily able to gain access to the black market, since I was the one who created the password. But I do have to say, this experience was extremely nerve-wracking. If this had not been the only method I could have used to gain access to dungeons, I would have never have come here. Actually, finding a dungeon wasn't the only reason why I headed to the black market. There was another reason. I was in urgent need of a broker. Do you think I would stupidly short C.B and buy a bunch of WV stock without hiding my identity? Once though Bias dies a month from now, the prime suspect would be the one guy who days before his death bets on C.B's crash and W.V's rise. Tell me if that's not suspicious? Although Silent Creeper was officially identified as the killer, the main culprit could be someone else, as at the end of the day Silent Creeper could have just been hired to do the job. The man behind the attack was the true mastermind behind this, not Silent Creeper, and the police already knew this. Stupidly investing in C.B and WV could result in my own demise. Hence why I needed a broker. A broker was an intermediary who would anonymously deal with my investments without asking any questions regarding who I was and why I was doing this. Since the black market was filled with both villains and heroes, the brokers were used to situations like mine. Which was exactly what I wanted, since I didn't want to gather unnecessary attention towards myself. Fortunately for me, as I once again boast about the fact that I was the author of the novel, know the right person for the job. We're here. Clang. Opening a similarly large metal door to the one at the entrance, the two burly men stepped aside and allowed me to get a clear view of what was behind the door. How should I describe this? It was a completely different scene than what someone would have expected when hearing the word black market. When you imaged how a black market would be, you would instantly think of words like filthy, dangerous, dirty, or anything that was synonymous with unpleasant. However, expectations and reality often do mix up, and this black market looked exactly like a night market. Vendors who were selling their goods in their respective stalls were neatly lined up in rows that I could see no end of. If not for the fact that all the customers were wearing masks to hide their identities, someone could have easily mistaken this as your regular night market. A huge opening appeared on the ceiling, allowing the moonlight to penetrate the market, enveloping the market with a sense of tranquility. The lights from the lamps brightly illuminated to roads, allowing for a clearer view of the goods in the market. It was probably the best-looking black market you could find out there. Actually, I designed the black market to be like this since I wanted to spice things up a bit. But even then, this was incredible. I guess words weren't enough to describe this place. Walking along the road and passing by the numerous stalls, I could see a wide variety of products being sold. From potions to artifacts, all sorts of products that I urgently needed were being displayed right before me. It took me a great deal of willpower to stop myself from purchasing any of them. Right now I had a goal to accomplish. Making my way towards a secluded spot in the black market, I quickly went towards a rather inconspicuous-looking wooden bench and sat down. Sitting there with my head down, I patiently waited for 5 minutes. Precisely after 5 minutes had passed, a black-hooded individual sat next to me, to which I nodded my head without turning it. How may we the Lost Reapers be of service to you? I need a broker. What type? Codename Small Snake. There was a slight pause in our conversation after I directly mentioned the name of the broker that I wanted. Although the hood covered the features of the individual who I was talking to, I could vaguely feel that underneath the hood his brows were tightly knit in a frown. It wasn't because I requested a big individual, but rather, an almost unknown one. Because there were so many employees working in Lost Reapers, it was hard to keep track of who was who. Small Snake was what you called a hidden treasure. Someone that was capable yet unknown. Well, that was until now. It was very understandable for the hooded figure to have trouble remembering who Small Snake was. He was an unknown character until the later half of the novel. In the novel, codename Small Snake interacts with Kevin a couple of times before forming some sort of business relationship with him. From there, Kevin was able to quickly see how capable of an individual, codename Small Snake, was. Not only was he great at hiding his traces when carrying a transaction, but he also had many connections with certain suppliers that could provide Small Snake with quality ingredients such as Luxitin, an incredibly rare flower that grows in the depth of the Elven territory, for below market prices. His connection later proved to be extremely useful to Kevin, who was in dire need of certain rare ingredients. Are you sure about your request? Certain. Surprised by my firm response, the hooded figure let out a small sigh and stood up. Codename Small Snake shall be here shortly. May we hope our services satisfy your need. Thank you. And just like that, the hooded figure disappeared just as fast as he had appeared. 20 minutes after the hooded figure departed, I heard light footsteps approaching my location. Sitting down next to me like the hooded figure had previously done, a lanky-looking youth that had his features hidden beneath a white mask sat next to me. Codename Small Snake at your service, how may I help you? Contrary to his appearance, Small Snake's voice was quite deep, which slightly surprised me, but not for long, as I managed to quickly regain my composure. I want you to be my broker. My commission is 5% on all profits, and my payment is 10% of the investment. Without skipping a beat, Small Snake told me his terms. Also, depending on how much you wish to invest, the terms of the deal may change. Okay. Taking out my hand, I extended it to him, gesturing to him that I had agreed with his terms. My straightforwardness caused Small Snake to be slightly taken back. He had originally expected the person before him to complain and grumble at the unreasonable demands. But contrary to his expectations, he agreed immediately. Moreover, he seemed rather confident in his abilities, like he was sure that he would be able to carry out his request. Small Snake was a capable individual. In fact, he could have been considered a top-class broker. However, because his demands were so high, he had never had a customer before. When he first joined the Lost Reapers, he had expected requests to flood in non-stop and that he would constantly be busy with demands. But contrary to his expectations, 2 months after entering the Lost Reapers, he still had not served a single customer. Not only that, all the customers that he managed to talk to always grumbled about his insanely high rates or preferred to go towards more senior colleagues who were more reputable than himself. This resulted in his talent being stagnant and hidden until Kevin finally found him. Well, I guess I was the one who found him this time. In order for me not to mess too much with the storyline, I'll build a solid relationship with Small Snake and make him interact with Kevin when the time was right. Staring at the figure before him whose features were covered by a mask, Small Snake fell into deep thought. This could potentially be his big break. If he were to successfully complete this deal and show off his capabilities, he could finally attract more customers to him. Although his rates were high, there was a specific reason for this. His connections and skills were top-notch. Not only was he capable of making it almost impossible for inspectors or individuals to trace his movements, but his connections were also some of the best in the world. If not for the fact that he was currently being hunted by certain individuals, he would have never have come to work for Lost Reapers. In the end, after hesitating a little bit, Small Snake finally stretched his hand out and firmly shook mine. Feeling the large hand which marked the first deal he had ever agreed on, Small Snake decided there and then that he will do his absolute best to accomplish whatever his first customer desired. Chapter 22, Black Market 2. Everything is starting to make sense now. Hearing Ren's investment plan, Small Snake's face couldn't help but scrunch up in frustration. It was nothing short of idiotic. He was also beginning to doubt the reason as to why he was chosen. At first, he thought it may have been because he had somehow heard about his outstanding talent, but now he was starting to believe it was because no other broker wanted to work with him. Shorting C.B Pharmaceuticals, a behemoth in the pharmaceutical industry, and investing in W.V stock? From a sane person's point of view, this was an investment that had no basis to back up its claim. With C.B's current performance, the stock was expected to rise even further. Moreover, with his connections, he could tell beforehand if something was going on within the company. But there were no signs of abnormality within CB, suggesting that this was an investment that had no foundation behind it. What was even more confusing was the fact that he needed to employ the service of a black market broker for this kind of deal. Black market brokers were hired when one wanted to hide their identity from the prying eyes of the world when making an investment. This was usually done so that the client could avoid government agents' pursuit. But that was only applicable to criminals. Is he perhaps going to kill someone important? Small Snake thought as he stared at his employer up and down. He firmly doubted it. Judging from his demeanor and strength, he was in no way a rich second-generation kid, plus he roughly estimated that his contractor's strength was around GF rank. There was simply no way he could kill anyone important enough to warrant a stock fluctuation. Not with his meager amount of strength. Was he perhaps trying to hide his identity because he's too embarrassed to publicly go through with his own deal? Small Snake thought as he bitterly shook his head. From what he could tell, this was probably the most plausible hypothesis he could come up with. I mean, no matter how Small Snake looked at it, his client was neither some big shot nor someone strong enough to assassinate an important figure. What irked him the most about this deal was how confident his employer was. His demeanor was like that of someone who was sure to make money out of this nonsensical deal. Was he delusional? No matter how Small Snake looked at it, this deal was simply stupid. Yet, deep within his heart, maybe just maybe, he hoped for his client to be right. Well, who knows, maybe he'll really be right. Small Snake thought as he couldn't help but lightly chuckle at the almost impossible scenario. Rather than just question, it was better to just perform as the client wished. Sometimes you just might be in for a surprise. Moreover, the main policies employed by all Lost Reapers employees were: never ask questions about client identity. Never ask questions about client action. Therefore, even if he wanted to convince his client against doing such investment, he couldn't, as it was Lost Reapers' policy to not question the client's decision. Letting out a sigh underneath his mask, Small Snake quickly went through his terms and signed it. At least he was getting paid for his work. It was just a bummer to see his first client lose so much money. Seeing Small Snake's subtle actions, I couldn't help but laugh. Although he was wearing a mask, his expressions could be read like an open book. Just the way he flinched when he heard about the deal, and how his shoulders dropped at the realization that he was dealing with a stupid client was so easy to read. I'll let him be for now, he'll eventually thank me later. I thought to myself as I enjoyed watching his crestfallen expression. So how much are you planning on investing? For now I have about 10,000 U I can invest, but I'm planning on investing at least 5 times that. So around 50,000 U? Maybe less? Who knows, around that range though. Small Snake was already starting to shed tears beneath his mask. What kind of small-time investment was this? 10,000 U? 50,000 U? With this, Small Snake could confirm that he wasn't some second-generation rich kid that loved throwing away money. With such a meager amount, even if you somehow predicted correctly, the amount you would make would at most be in the triple digits. What was the point of commissioning him if you were only planning on investing so little? Reminding himself of the Lost Reapers' rules, Small Snake resigned himself to the harsh reality. Okay, so do you have the money with you now? No, I only have about 10,000 U with me. Okay, so when will you invest? Once I make enough, I guess. Pardon? Once I make more money. From this point on, Small Snake was able to deduce one thing about the identity of his employer. He was a villain. A black-hearted villain that loved to make hard-working employees like him suffer. Seeing Small Snake's drooping figure, I barely managed to hold back my laughter. I may have gone a bit overboard, but I really enjoyed teasing him. Weakly walking towards his chair, Small Snake sat down while holding his head in despair. How are you plan ing on Mac ing the mon why? He weakly said as he tried his best to regain his composure. Oh, I'm gonna go to a dungeon and, Clang! Falling down from his chair, Small Snake could vividly see his life flash before his eyes. What have I done to deserve this? Turning my body around, I could barely keep my laughter in check. My whole body started shaking uncontrollably as a consequence of me trying to hold back my laughter. This was probably the funniest reaction I had ever seen in my life. It took a solid hour for Small Snake to regain his composure, but his current demeanor was a far cry from when I had just met him. He resembled a black company employee who had resigned himself to his fate. Staring at his lifeless expression, I slightly smiled. Although Small Snake was very competent, the main reason that propelled me into contacting him was not his outstanding set of skills, but rather his devotion to the job. He was the type of person that took every job seriously. Therefore, no matter how absurd the request was, once accepted, he would always try to accomplish it the best way he possibly could. Moreover, he was someone that could keep his mouth shut. Even if he was tied down to a chair and endlessly tortured, his mouth would never waver. That was how reliable of a person he was. All right, let's not dwell on the specifics of the deal. You just have to trust me. Staring at me for a couple of seconds, Small Snake sighed and finally came to terms with my absurd financial plan. Fine, I'm in no position to talk anyways. Actually, I still need your help. Warily glancing at me, Small Snake switched back into his business demeanor. What other service do you require from me? I need a monster corpse broker. Ha! So I guess you weren't joking when you mentioned the word dungeon previously. Nodding my head, I continued explaining my plan. Don't worry, I'll probably be safe. Moreover, I'm only going to go to an F-rank dungeon, which shouldn't be too difficult. What I need your help with is with handling the corpses which I will bring back from the dungeon. Nodding his head, Small Snake took out a piece of paper and started scribbling on it. F-rank dungeon. The current market rate is around 1,000 U per normal monster corpse, and 5,000 U for boss monsters. If you consider the conditions at which the corpse is presented, the payment can increase. Moreover, if by some crazy chance you manage to acquire an F-rank monster core, you can very easily sell that for 100,000 U depending on its size. Turning his head towards where I was standing, Small Snake mind quickly raced as he slowly formulated a plan for me. From what you've told me, you wanted to at least invest 50,000 U. Considering that you have 10,000 of the 50,000 U you are planning to invest, you would approximately need 40,000 U. If you want to earn that much in an F-rank dungeon, then you must either kill 40 F-rank monsters, 8 bosses, or find an F-rank core, which would leave plenty left to spare. Furrowing his brows underneath his mask, Small Snake handed me the paper in which he had calculated the possible things I needed to do in order to raise 40,000 U. This is a simple layout of the things you need to do to raise that much money. Moreover, that is if we are excluding dungeon entrance fees, commissions, and the cost of paying for your equipment. Staring deeply at me, Small Snake asked, "Are you sure about this?" Grinning, I sat in front of him and said, "If I wasn't sure about this, I wouldn't have come here." After staring at me for a solid minute, Small Snake nodded his head and stood up. "I don't know where your confidence comes from, but since you're my first and only client, I will help you the best that I possibly can." Couldn't ask for more. Similarly standing up, I shook his hand. "All right, I guess we have a deal." Soon after parting ways with Small Snake, I made my way towards the black market stalls. Now that I had some time for myself, I could take a proper look at the things available for sale in the black market. Taking out a small black card that Small Snake gave me after we finalized our deal, I quickly went towards the entrance of the black market where a large metal door stood. Quickly taking out 8,000 U from my pocket, I headed in the direction of where the door was. Besides the large metal door, stood a neat black stall that had a relatively long queue. Arriving at the stall, I patiently waited in line for approximately 15 minutes before a sales employee quickly went to greet me at the register. Taking the black card out, I handed the card plus 8,000 U to the employee. The black card I was currently holding was an exclusive card that could only be used in the black market and was the main payment method used when purchasing things on the black market. What the employee was doing was converting the cash I gave to him into a cryptocurrency specifically made only for the black market. Although transactions through cash were generally safe, it was not very efficient when dealing with transactions that dealt with large figures. By creating a cryptocurrency, the black market was able to swiftly deal with several problems at the same time. 1. Since crypto was untraceable, it ensured safe transactions. 2. And most importantly, allowed the black market to act as an intermediary during the transactions. People tended to forget this when entering the black market. But this place was flooded with villains. Villains were essentially scums of society that held no regard for rules or morality. If there was no one to keep them in check, they could have probably forced someone to make a deal or even worse given them fake money. Therefore, with the black card system, it became much easier to trade and check if there was any fraud taking place in the transaction. Because they were using the black market cryptocurrency, fake money could not be used as the black market currency was only available here. This way, when doing transactions here, people didn't need to be wary of potential scams. And if by any chance someone was indeed trying to commit a scam, the black market forces would swiftly deal with them. How much would you like to recharge? 8,000 you please. All right, please wait a moment. Placing my money inside of a black box, the sales employee pressed a button and patiently waited a couple of seconds. Ding! After the black box ringed, signaling that it was done with whatever it was doing, the employee took my card and placed it on top of the box. Okay, everything is ready, please enjoy yourself. Handing me my card back, the sales employee smiled and started serving the next client. Taking my card, I quickly went to look at the never-ending rows of stalls. It's time to go shopping. Chapter 23, Black Market, 3. Seeing the numerous people going to and fro between each stall, I couldn't help but feel my heart race at the extensive number of goods that shone brightly under the street lights. Each one looked more tempting than the other. Going through each stall one by one, I made a mental note of the things that seemed interesting. This way, once I went through the majority of the stalls, I could decide which thing I needed to buy and which thing I didn't. Since I was planning on venturing inside of a dungeon, I require several things. Arriving at a stall, I went forward and picked up a slim necklace that had a purple stone imbued in it. Name, Necklace of Tranquility. Type, Artifact. Rank, G. Use, allows wearer to have better sleep. Description, artifact created by an unknown blacksmith. With the aid of the status window, I could see the detail of each artifact I touched, making it easier for me to look for what I wanted. Looking at the necklace in my hand, I thought, this could indeed be useful, as sleeping inside of a dungeon can be challenging. Dungeons were essentially portals that connected Earth to the demon world. Their harsh environment means that only monsters or strong individuals could survive inside of them. With its harsh conditions, one needs, alongside good equipment, to be in their best possible shape. If one lacked sleep, then it became much harder for them to continue venturing inside of the dungeon as a sleep-deprived person's reaction time becomes slower. Thus, this necklace could definitely be of good use inside of dungeons. Excuse me. Yes, how may I help you? Calling out the stall owner, who wore a black hood to hide his features. I pointed at the necklace in my hand and asked, how much is this? Carefully inspecting the necklace in my hands, the stall owner paused for a second before saying, that necklace? 3,000 you. Placing the necklace down, I went to the next stall. Sleeping was for the weak. Slower reaction time? I say to hell with that. 3,000 you? My word. Talk about daylight robbery. Although the effect was good, there's no way a G rank artifact was worth that much. Trying my best to forget about this accident, I ventured deeper into the market. As I was walking, I remembered the number of certain stalls that had some interesting items up for sale. Because of my limited budget, I needed to be careful when buying stuff. Right now, more than anything else, I needed a sword. Because for obvious reasons I couldn't bring the school's katana with me. I had no choice but to look for a new sword. Moreover, I also needed to buy some sort of dimensional storage that could help me store the corpses of the monsters that I killed. If not, how was I supposed to bring back the corpses of all the monsters I killed? Unlike the MC who has a system that comes with an enormous storage space, I didn't have such privilege. Fortunately for me, the black market was filled with such items. Plus, if I was lucky enough, I might get some good deals. Well, not so much for dimensional storages as their price was fairly inflexible. The bigger the storage provided, the more expensive the artifact would become. And since I was short on money, I probably couldn't afford to buy myself a high-end storage device. In fact, even purchasing a low-end one was challenging for me with my current budget. If I couldn't purchase one, I would have to literally walk back to the entrance of the dungeon and drop the monster bodies in front of the gate. That would be total hell. Plus, since I would most likely not be the only one entering the dungeon, I risked the possibility of getting my spoils stolen. In short, dimensional storage was a must. Arriving before a weapon stall that I had previously passed by, I quietly looked through their sword section. Various swords were neatly displayed in the stall, allowing me to get a clearer view of how they looked like. Each sword and weapon had a different brand imprinted on the sheath or body of the weapon. This was because different weapons were forged by different blacksmiths. The weapons created by famous blacksmiths could be considered the blacksmith's brand, and branded goods were naturally expensive. The price was also not something normal people could afford, especially for someone as poor as me. But I still decided to test my luck. Maybe, just maybe I could find a sword that perfectly fit my style and didn't cost much. "Excuse me." Calling out the shop owner, I pointed at a slim sword that looked both robust and light at the same time. Although it wasn't a katana, the keiki style wasn't a sword art that could only explicitly be practiced by a katana. All it required was a slim and firm sword that could move at incredible speeds without breaking. Sure. Nodding his head, the stall owner went to the back and picked up the sword. Handing it to me, I quietly admired the sword. A slim straight blade with black aesthetic patterns deeply etched on the main body of the blade, quietly rested on the palm of my hands. It had no guard, and unlike the katana which lightly curves, this sword was straight. Carefully tracing my fingers along the edge of the blade, I could feel incredible sharpness coming from the sword that made it seem like it could cut anything. Coo! Twitching my brows for a second, I quietly looked down at my finger which was now bleeding. This is a fine sword, I thought, as I grabbed a napkin and wiped my finger. Even after healing my wound with some light ointment, I could still feel a stinging sensation coming from the finger that got cut. This sword was incredibly good. Well, compared to the Academy's katana, this was not as good, but that was simply because better materials were used when forging the weapon. However, although the Academy's weapons were good, they were in fact not artifacts. They were specifically made for training, and therefore the Academy deemed it unnecessary for the training equipment to be artifacts. With regular weapons, the school could more or less keep the students in check, but as artifacts contained certain powers, the risk of injury during a duel would drastically increase. Therefore, aside from their exceptional firmness and low density, the Academy weapons did not have any special effects. Although they were indeed top-of-the-line swords, they would still lose out against a similarly durable artifact. Also, since the Academy's weapons weren't artifacts, their stats were unknown. Name: Silver Edge. Type: Artifact. Rank: F. Use: an extremely sharp sword that can easily cut through the toughest metal. Description: artifact that was found inside of the demon world, and is a sword that had previously been used to slay several demons. Surprisingly, the sword was not made by a famous blacksmith but was actually found inside of a dungeon. Looking at its clean body, I instantly knew that this was a refurbished sword. May I try it? Turning my head towards the shop owner, I saw him shake his head at my question. Well, fair enough. I was careless as well. I asked without thinking, if by accident someone recognized the sword art I was using, a massive headache would be coming my way. Does it have a scabbard? Feeling the blade in my hand, even though I couldn't try it, I could feel the sword being really compatible with the keiki style. Not only was it light, but it was also extremely durable. Yes. Nodding, the shop owner went to the back and took a black rectangular scabbard. Placing the sword inside of the scabbard, I nodded satisfactorily. Because the sword did not have a guard, the sword neatly fitted the scabbard, making it look like I had a long black stick. It sort of looked futuristic. Low-key, just the way I like it. How much is this? 5,999 U. Looking at the sword that rested on the side of my hip, I hesitated for a second before handing him my black card. Thank you for your purchase.
Yeah.
Leaving the store with a new sword and 6,000 U down, I couldn't help but grumble at the price. I just used 75% of my budget on a sword. This means that I only had 2,001 U left within my card. Now I had to be especially careful about what I purchased next, as my budget has become even more constricted. Stopping for a moment, I thought for a while and decided to go to a stall which I had previously passed. The stall I was going to was a stall that only sold dimensional storage type tools, which was essential for me alongside my sword. The selling of dimensional storage type tools was actually illegal. That was because, when dimensional storages were first introduced, a lot of copycats tried to imitate their technology. This resulted in disastrous events where out of nowhere the tool would break, due to their poor quality, and as a result of this, a lot of people got injured or even died. It had to be noted that dimensional storages dealt with the laws of space and time, meaning that the consequences of them breaking was disastrous. At a certain point, it became so bad that the central government illegalized the production of dimensional storages and only allowed certain licensed individuals to produce them. Because of this, the prices for dimensional storage inflated and became much higher than their production cost. But fortunately for me, as I was in the black market, the prices were far lower than for what I could get them outside. It didn't take long for me to arrive at my destination. Looking at the stall that sold things like storage rings, storage bags, storage pouch, etc., I first looked at the prices. Since prices were based on the storage space dimension, with only 2,000 U remaining, I could only afford 25 cubic meters worth of space. Storage dimensions started at 5 cubic meters for 300 U and increased a further 300 U for every additional 5 cubic meters added. In my case, since I wanted to purchase a 25 cubic meter storage device, the total price was around 1,500 U. It came out at a total of 1,800 U though, as I decided to purchase the storage device in the form of a bracelet. Name: storage bracelet, 25 cubic meters. Type: artifact. Rank: G. Use: a device that stores items inside of dimensional space. Description: common artifact which was crafted by a low-rank blacksmith. Since storage devices have many forms, such as bags, pouches, rings and etc., the smaller the medium was, the more expensive the price was. In my case, since I choose to go with a bracelet instead of a bag, I paid an extra 300 U, totaling the price at 1,800 U. Looking at the black leather bracelet that rested on my wrist, I nodded satisfactorily. If one didn't look carefully, they would think this was just a regular bracelet. It was best to disguise dimensional storages, as it could potentially be a target for thieves or people looking to make easy cash by robbing someone. Since no one knew what went inside of dungeons, as there were no cameras, nobody could verify if someone had been robbed or killed inside of a dungeon. Dungeons were basically lawless zones, where be it human or monster, they could all be your enemy. It was always best to keep a low profile. Since I only had 200 U left on my card, I decided to spend the rest of my money on some potions such as the Stamina Recovery Potion and Mana Recovery Potion. Then when I felt like I had enough potions, I proceeded to spend the rest of my money on some ointments which I would need in case of flesh wounds. Because they were relatively low-quality potions, I managed to buy everything I needed with my 200 U remaining. Satisfied with what I got, I decided to head towards Dungeon Seekers, the place where I could get access to dungeons. An organization that was worth over 1 trillion U, and was one of the main forces operating in the black market. It could be said that the main reason people entered the black market was not because of the illegal goods and services that were being sold, but because of dungeon seekers. Because guilds tend to monopolize dungeons, not allowing external parties into them, people who seek to become stronger or strike it rich and were not part of a guild have no choice but to come here. Since dungeon seekers allowed access to anyone, whether they were heroes or villains, people from all over the world came here. Moreover, the entrance fee and commission proposed by dungeon seekers were not outrageous, which in turn made this place even more popular amongst the general population. It could be said that without dungeon seekers, the black market wouldn't have been as popular as it was now. Chapter 24, Black Market, 4. Arriving in front of another metal door that seemed more secure and robust than the one that led to the black market, I knocked once. Bam! On the right side of the door, a small compartment opened up to which I placed my black card. Voom! As soon as I placed my card, green light emerged from the bottom of the compartment enveloping my card. Die. A couple of seconds after the green light disappeared, I heard the sound of a ring coming from the compartment indicating to me that the scan was complete. Taking my card back, the metal door started rumbling before slowly opening up. Vam! Entering the building, I was instantly stunned. A luxuriously decorated hall, where at the front stood a stunning reception counter made of a mixture of wood and marble. Various receptionists tended the guest from behind the counter, and a faint citrusy smell lingered in the air. Because Kevin had never been here in the novel, it was also my first time knowing how this place looked like. Words couldn't even come close to describe how a place actually looked like in real life, as things such as the smell, the sounds, and the atmosphere always tended to be hard to conceptualize in words. You could get a general idea of how a place looked like, but it would never be the same as in real life. Every time I came to a new place, I became speechless on how different the place was compared to what I had written. In this case, even though I had no idea how this place would look like, I was still momentarily overwhelmed by this place's grandeur. It resembled a palace created for the king of an empire. Clean white marble floor, silky red carpets, gold-coated lamps, neatly sculpted desks, this place had everything. This was what true luxury looked like. Arriving at the front desk of the reception, I went towards a clerk on the right side of the reception desk. Welcome to Dungeon Seekers, how may we help you? I'm looking to enter a dungeon. Smiling at my reply, the receptionist took a small tablet out and presented it to me. These are all the available dungeons that we have at the moment. Scrolling through the tablet, I could see a large list of dungeons. Each dungeon had a red and green circle around them, indicating whether they were available or not. Each dungeon had a limit on how many people could enter, and if the limit was not respected, the dungeon would destabilize, resulting in a potential desync. A desync was essentially a phenomenon where a dungeon would lose its connection with the demon world. Once a dungeon lost its connection to the demon world, it essentially became a void dungeon, which was a dungeon that led to nowhere. Since dungeon seekers knew this, they made sure that the limit was never broken by always leaving one slot open. We currently have 3 operating G-rank dungeons, 6 F-rank dungeons, 18 D-rank dungeons, 11 C-rank dungeons, 13 B-rank dungeons, and lastly 4 A-rank dungeons. Seeing the endless amount of dungeons available, I was left speechless. The number of dungeons they were hiding was enough to make people wonder how the government still hasn't done anything. Actually, considering their wealth and influence, even if the central government wanted to do something, I doubt they'd be able to hurt Doom-gone seekers. That was unless they wanted to start a full-blown war, which no one desired. Taking the tablet, I quickly went through the list for F-rank dungeons. F rank, Kuru's barracks. Description: directly spawns contractor inside of Demon Army barracks. Price: 15% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. F rank, Blood Sea. Description: directly spawns contractor in an oceanic environment filled with bloodthirsty sea creatures. Price: 15% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. F rank, Red Desolation. Description: directly spawns contractors in desert-like terrain that is scarce in water and food sources. Price: 11% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. F rank, Miasma Mountains. Description: directly spawns contractor on top of the high mountain range covered with highly toxic miasma. Price: 8% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. F rank, Forest of Greed. Description: directly spawns contractors inside a forest that tempts prey by creating illusions of their innermost desire. Price: 17% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. F rank, Earth's Wrath. Description: directly spawns contractor near a volcanic area where temperatures can reach as high as 100 degrees Celsius. Price: 13% of contractor loot plus entrance fee of 500 U. What should I choose? Seeing the list of F-rank dungeons, I monetarily paused to think about which one to choose out of all of them. Blood Sea was out of the question as I didn't bring any waterproof equipment with me. Miasma Mountains was simply too dangerous, and I didn't have poison resistance potions with me. Forest of Greed had a 17% clause, where I would have to pay 17% of all profits gained from the dungeon. That was a tad bit too high for my standards. So that was also out of the question. This leaves me with Earth's Wrath, Red Desolation, and Kuru's Barracks. Looking alternatively at the 3 options before me, after contemplating for a while I decided to go with Red Desolation. It had the lowest contractor clause of 11% and the food and water shortage should pose no problem to me who has just bought a dimensional bracelet. I will go with Red Desolation. Very well. Here's a contract you will need to sign before we can finalize our deal. Handing me a 3-page long contract, I patiently looked through the contents. In short, before entering a dungeon they will check the equipment that I will bring inside so that no misunderstandings can arise when I exit the dungeon and report my gains. When exiting a dungeon the staff will do a strict check on the items and things I will bring out so that no false reports were made when paying the contractor clause. A 500 U entrance fee was to be paid up front, accompanied by a 1000 U deposit. The maximum time a person could stay inside of a dungeon was 30 days. If the person did not come out by the designated time, a specialized squad will directly enter the dungeon and forcefully drag you out. Lastly, the contractor could, in case of emergencies, call for a support team that will come as soon as possible to aid them if they were in any danger. The result of calling a support team resulted in the loss of the deposit. Seeing the content, I nodded satisfactorily and signed it. There was nothing that I was particularly against. They were rules that tried to be as fair as possible. Thank you very much. Smiling, the receptionist took the paper and we finalized the payment. Please follow me. After I paid a total of 1,500 U, deposit plus entrance fee, I was escorted to a large waiting room. Guest 507-7684, Gate 756. Looking at the piece of paper that I had received once I completed the payment, I neatly folded it and placed it in my pocket. This was my dungeon ticket, better not lose it. Inside the room, there were several individuals, who just like me, were waiting to enter the dungeon. Several waiters were walking and serving food and drinks to the people present inside of the waiting room. Glancing around for a couple of seconds, I went towards a secluded area that had fewer people and sat down. If I said I wasn't nervous, I'd be lying. So far, my first week in this world has been smooth sailing. Aside from a few ups and downs here and there in the academy, everything that I wanted to achieve I achieved. The keiki style, the seed of limit, even the VR test was successful as I managed to complete the extra task. Everything that I wanted to accomplish was completed flawlessly. But that meant nothing. Don't let the achievements get to your head. I repeatedly told myself, as I was just about to enter the dungeon. My small achievements shouldn't be something that I should take to heart. I shouldn't become arrogant. Just because everything was going my way didn't mean that everything else was going to be smooth sailing. Facing the dungeon, which I had never been to before, I should never let my guard down. No matter how well things were going for me, a slight mistake could cost me my life. Arrogance was the best recipe for failure. As I was self-reflecting, I tried adjusting my mindset. When going inside of a dungeon, where there was a high mortality rate, one must not go in there thinking that everything would be alright and no danger would befall them. That was not called confidence, it was called stupidity. In the face of potential danger, one must humble themselves and make sure to give it their all so that one doesn't get caught off guard. Guest 507-7684, please step forward. Hearing my number, I stood up and went towards the person who called for my name. Wearing a nice black butler outfit, like most of the male employees working here, the man led me towards a large door. D. 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 Shaw. Just before we entered the door, the employee pressed 6 key codes on the lock of the door and then proceeded to scan his eye. Clang. After a brief pause, the door opened by itself, allowing me to see what was behind it. I was instantly left speechless. I was so overwhelmed by the scenery before me that no word escaped from my mouth. An enormous hall, that extended so far that I couldn't even catch sight of the other side, was before me. Keep in mind that my stats, compared to before, were much better, which meant my vision drastically improved alongside my stat improvement, and yet I still couldn't see the ending of this place. That was just how enormous this place was. Moreover, that wasn't what left me flabbergasted. It was the fact that in the hall there were warp gates everywhere. A warp gate was a teleportation device that allowed a person to teleport to a given coordinate. It was similar to a dungeon gate, but unlike dungeon gates, where the location was fixed, a warp gate coordinates could be changed. Walking around, and seeing the towering warp gates that were as tall as a house, I felt like an ant. Besides the gates, there were white-cloaked individuals with masks that covered their whole faces. Their masks reminded me of the Black Panther, back in my previous world. But compared to his black mask, theirs was white. After walking for 10 minutes, I was finally able to see my designated gate. Oh hey, Edward. Standing in front of the gate, a blond middle-aged man who had a cigarette in his mouth waved towards the person escorting me. His long hair, which was tied in a ponytail, and his short untrimmed beard made him look like an unemployed adult who was in the middle of his midlife crisis. Yes. Giving a simple nod to the middle-aged man, the man who escorted me here, Edward, turned around and prepared to leave. As quiet as usual, huh? Seeing Edward leave with no response, the middle-aged man gave up and looked at me. So you're the one who wants to enter the dungeon? Yes. Sigh, just when I thought I had the day off. PCHHHH. Throwing the cigarette on the ground, the middle-aged man stepped on it. All right, follow me. Walking with his hands in his pockets, the middle-aged man grumbled as he walked towards the gate. Timothy 1, Timothy 2, I've got a guest here, so open the gate. Fine. Taking out a card from his pocket, the middle-aged man handed it to the two people in white clothes who were blocking the gate. Taking out a small box, one of the white guards swiped the card, and when the box flashed green he stepped to the side.
Bye.
Timothy 1, Timorth 2, don't miss me too much while I'm gone. Waving at two white guards, the middle-aged man stepped into the gate and beckoned me to follow. Stepping on the gate, the middle-aged man took a cigarette from his pocket and lit it up. Looking at me who was confused, the middle-aged man spoke with a grin. Don't worry, they're always like this. They're just shy. Sure. I'm pretty sure they were not shy. They just didn't want to talk to you. I retorted in my head without showing it on my face. Soon, as the warp gate lit up, I felt my body slowly lift up from the ground. Then I saw my body turn into particles, and shortly after I started losing all my senses. It first started with my vision, then my hearing, and slowly all my remaining senses. Vam. Chapter 25, Dungeon 1. Blarg. As soon as I regained my senses, I felt my stomach churning, and before I knew it I was on the ground barfing. Fortunately, I didn't puke on my mask as I slightly tilted it upwards to allow the barf to escape from my mouth. First timer, huh? Looking at me, who was on the ground barfing, the middle-aged man shook his head amusingly. It took me a total of 5 minutes before I was finally able to stop my body from barfing. I felt like crap. After having vomited so much, I could barely stand up. Sit down for a bit. Leaning against a nearby rock, the middle-aged man held a new cigarette between his fingers and exhaled smoke in the air. It was only after I heard his voice that I managed to get a clear look at my surroundings. A vast plain field filled with oak trees was before my sight, and if one looked ahead, towering mountains that penetrated the clouds could be seen. The air felt extremely fresh, and it reminded me of the time when I was in Clayton Ridge. Looking around, I could see a massive warp gate behind me. 5 white-clothed individuals patrolled around it. I wonder how they managed to hide such a huge thing. You're probably wondering how we can hide the gate from the government's sight. Taken aback, I looked at the middle-aged man. How did he know? Blankly staring at the sky where the clouds were slowly darkening, showing signs of rain, the middle-aged man spoke. There's a barrier that covers a 5 kilometers radius of everything here. The barrier prevents the energy coming out from the dungeon from being leaked, and it also blocks electromagnetic waves, preventing any radio communications or detection devices from finding this place. Listening to him, I silently nodded. This was a smart choice. If the government were to find about this dungeon, they would swiftly take it over. No matter how strong the black market was, they wouldn't be able to fight against both the government and the Union. Since dungeons, monsters, and demons fell under the Union's jurisdiction, if an unclaimed gate was discovered, the Union would do anything within its power to claim it. And since the black market was not as strong as the Union, they could only resort to hiding dungeons that they found. But I was curious. Couldn't the Union just send spies and find the location of the dungeon? Cuckoo, your expression is so easy to read, kid. It's not so easy for spies to find the location of the dungeons. In the first place, the reason why we use warp gates is so that they can't find where the dungeon is. Moreover, with the barrier, which prevents any communication to the external world, it's almost impossible for them to find this place. That does make sense, but a barrier alone was not enough to prevent the Union from discovering this place. Actually, before that, was my expression that easy to read? It was fine if only Grandmaster Keiki could read my thoughts, but now another person, whom I just met, could easily read what I wanted to say. Was my face that easy to read? Moreover, I was currently wearing a mask. Apart from my eyes, everything else was covered. Does that mean he could read my expression solely based on my eyes? I need to make a mental note to myself to start practicing my poker face. Looking at my surroundings, I thought for a bit before saying out loud. If it were me, I would just look at the surrounding geology and narrow it down to possible locations. With the technology of this world, it wouldn't be too hard to narrow places down according to the details of the surroundings. Hoo-hoo, you're a smart one, eh? Laughing at my comment, the middle-aged man stood up. That's true. But, since we are strong, both the Union and the government won't really spend that much effort in finding the dungeons we secured. Suddenly the middle-aged man's eyes narrowed, as he spat the next words coldly. That is, unless they want to start a war with us. Standing up, I followed the middle-aged man. By the way, sir, how should I call you? As we were walking, I couldn't help ask him for his name. Although he may look completely unrefined and crude, when he spat those last words, my heart shivered for a split second. Me? Puffing the cigarette in his mouth, the middle-aged man smirked. Just call me Thomas. Okay, Mr. Thomas. Do it without the honorifics, please. It makes it sound cheesy. Okay. After walking alongside Thomas, and chatting with him for a bit, I suddenly felt a tremendous energy coming from the distance. You feel it?
Yeah.
That's the accumulated energy of all the monsters inside of the dungeon. Staring ahead at the source of where the energy was coming from, I couldn't help but feel slightly nervous. Looking at me, Thomas grinned as he said, "Nervous? I'd be lying if I said no. Don't worry too much, although it is indeed scary for a first-timer like you, you'll get used to it eventually." Slightly pausing, he looked at the gate, which was becoming clearer by the minute, and lightly said, "Moreover, wait till you see an S-ranked gate." An S-ranked gate, huh? If the energy coming out from an F-ranked gate was this much, I wonder how much energy would come out from an S-ranked gate. Just the thought sent shivers down my spine. Yo, Timothy 8, Timothy 9. Greeting two individuals clad in white masks and armor, Thomas handed them a card. Ignoring Thomas, the two guards took the card and scanned it. After making sure everything was all right, both guards stepped to the side and made way for him and me. Taking a step forward, I could feel the tremendous energy bursting out from the gate. I guess this is where we part ways, kid. Momentarily startled by Thomas's voice, as I was too engrossed on the enormous gate before me, I could see Thomas standing beside the guards. Thank you for everything, Thomas. Don't worry about it. Just doing my job. Take care of yourself, kid. Nodding my head, I turned around and faced the dungeon. Hoo. Taking a deep breath, I took my first step into a dungeon. As soon as I felt my eyes regain their usual clarity, I felt a blast of hot air engulf my body. The dry environment instantly caused my lips to tight up, prompting me to repeatedly lick them to keep them moist. The ground beneath me was full of cracks, and signs of skirmishes could be seen everywhere in the surroundings, evidently showing that battles had occurred in this place. At the very end of my sight, I could see sand dunes made up of red and black sand cover the landscape. Just like its description, there really is no source of water nor food here. It was a completely desolate place. The surrounding vegetation was all withered, and there were no signs of animal or living creatures on sight. Aside from monsters, who don't need to eat or drink, the only other living beings were the small insects that hid beneath the cracked earth. Staring at the light red skies that enveloped the surrounding area, I felt like it created a stronger sense of dread in this desolate world. Taking a moment so that I could adjust to the harsh environment, I sat down and quickly checked on my equipment. Carefully placing my hand on my hips where my newly acquired sword rested, I made a recount of the things that I brought. Let's see, the sword is here, food is inside my newly acquired bracelet and should last me for about a week. There also shouldn't be any problems regarding potions, as some cheap stamina recovery are carefully stored in my bracelet. What else? I think that's it. Seeing that I didn't have anything missing, I stood up and decided to venture deeper into the dungeon. Alright, to my very first dungeon. Kyuka. Stopping in front of a dead tree, I paused and stared at my opponent. Just like any novel with dungeons in them, my very first opponent was a goblin. Yes, a globin. Do you even need me to describe its features? I mean, it was a fucking goblin. Quack. And it sounded like a goblin too. Tapping on the handle of my newly acquired sword, a white streak appeared before the goblin. Click. Kuwak. Before the goblin could even have enough time to react, a red dot appeared on top of its forehead, which resulted in the goblin lifelessly slumping on the ground. How sharp! I thought as I admired my new sword. It felt exactly how someone would feel when cutting a block of butter. Smooth with little to no resistance. Pooh! Arriving before the goblin, I quickly spat on its body. Soon after spitting on its body, I kicked its body to the side, while also making sure I cursed at it. Fucking goblin. In short, I was totally abusing the dead goblin. But there was a good reason for my unreasonable actions. I didn't have any grudges against goblins or anything like that per se, it was just that I had to do so that I could trigger a certain event. And... quack. 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 Yup. A horde of about 20 or more goblins were madly running with blood-red eyes towards my direction. Although dungeons have been with human society for 10+ years, not a lot was known about the monsters residing in them. For example, out of all the monsters known to mankind, the number of monsters for which we knew detailed information about could be counted with one hand. Because monsters were not used to the Earth's atmosphere, bringing live samples back to Earth was an extremely difficult and arduous task that simply wasn't worth the cost. Because of how hard it was to get access to live samples of monsters, it became very hard for researchers to find out more about dungeon monsters. The research was extremely crucial in aiding humanity in getting a better understanding of the monsters which resided in the demon world. Researchers have predicted that one day there might be the possibility of the demon world suddenly attacking Earth. If we didn't put a lot of effort into finding more about the monsters that resided in the demon world, it might be too late when the time that monsters can enter Earth arrives. Professor Theodore Romhaus, the one who questioned me last time, was a leading figure in the research of monsters and beasts. Not only was he a fanatic in analyzing a beast's behavior and weakness, but he also loved to analyze and dissect monsters so that he could find out more about them. Monsters were weird creatures. They not only behaved irrationally, but sometimes when certain conditions were met they could trigger an unexpected event. Such is what was currently happening right now with the goblins. Because of my action of spitting and abusing the goblin, I managed to trigger a goblin horde. Actually, this was a little joke I put in the novel, but on several occasions, similar unexpected actions could cause certain monsters to do something you would least expect. In the case of goblins, because they always tended to be the first monsters the protagonists faced when entering a dungeon, I decided to add this feature so that I could bring justice to them. In actuality, I added it because I needed to meet a certain word count, and I couldn't come up with anything. That aside, goblins were basically the most useless monsters out there. For those who wanted to become stronger, goblins were considered training dummies, and for villains and demons, they were considered cannon fodder. They truly were the most abused species in all novels. In the story, Kevin alongside another party enter the Academy's dungeon. At first, the other group wanted to make things difficult for Kevin's party, but because he was too strong they could only silently endure. They later took out their grievances on a nearby goblin, which triggered their hidden feature where all goblins within a 100-meter radius turned berserk and attacked anything on sight. Since goblins were so weak and easily died when entering the Earth's atmosphere, it was very hard to get proper information on them. And on the off chance that they managed to retrieve a live sample, this unique ability of theirs would have never been discovered, as who would just spit kick and abuse a goblin for research purposes? Moreover, even if some deranged scientist did the following, if there were no other goblins around, their special feature was essentially useless. Right now though, I couldn't help but pat my back for adding such a feature. Quack. 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 With this method not only did I not need to find the goblins who were spread across the terrain, but I could also save a lot of time and train efficiently. Tapping the handle of my sword, I prepared myself for a long and challenging battle.